everything been coming along?
Everything's been good. The first couple of days of using your program, I've really been drilling the logic games foundation over, just kind of trying to shore up some loose ends that I have with logic games and trying to figure out better ways to, attack the different types of questions. So it's been good so far.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Any particular challenges you're facing I could support you on?
Well, one of the things, just a little bit about like how I've studied for the LSAT in the past. I actually was scheduled to take the test last January. I ended up pushing it back to April and then ended up canceling that. I took a prep course for 3 months leading up to that first test date, and I just really didn't feel confident in taking the test, and I pushed it back to April. And then during that time, I got employed and I'm now working full time. And it was just one of those situations where I really wasn't comfortable, you know, pinning down a test date and being able to consistently put in the hours every day to feel comfortable taking it in April, which I rescheduled for. So now I'm scheduled for the August one. For the past, I would say 2.5, 3 months, I've been studying anywhere in between like 2 to 3 hours a day. Just one of the things that I think I would really benefit from, and I know that I do really well on a set schedule. If I know what I have to do that day, then that works best for me. If it's I know I'm doing 2 hours of, in and out games, or I know that I'm tackling strength and weakening questions today. That's kind of like what works best for me. So I feel like a lot of the time in the past couple of months that I've been studying, I've been putting in a substantial amount of time, but sometimes when I take the practice test, like a full length exam, I'm not seeing like the benefits of that. So I am struggling kind of to find that schedule that I feel is actually like tangibly helping my cause. And I've done the Socratic review method for LR multiple times, and there are just some things and patterns that I feel like I should be recognizing and being able to recall when I take more practice exams or time sections that I just still have not really like been able to see it when I'm doing the question, just to make sure, oh, I know I made this mistake before. Let me not make this mistake again. I know this confused me last time in the stimulus or the answer choices. Let's not let that happen again. And I just think that if I have that, structured schedule of knowing what I am attacking every day, that could probably alleviate some of that.
I hear you on that. Yeah. Thanks for giving me the background here. It's definitely useful to orient our conversation. So you said you're taking the August LSAT.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking now mid to late July. You've got a little bit less than a month remaining.
Mm-hmm.
In the foundational section of the course, I've got super detailed day-by-day study plan breakdowns with associated videos. That's meant to give you a strong foundation in each section of the exam. You've been at this for a while already, though. So I want to help you create something more customized, given that you've only got a few weeks remaining.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned not seeing the benefits yet from taking practice tests. It sounded like you do see the benefit of drilling. You mentioned at the beginning of the call that that's what you're focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
How many full-length practice tests have you done?
I think I probably have done either 4 or 5 fully timed full-length practice exams, and probably 10 to 15 timed sections of each section.
Okay. So drilling, timed sections, full-length exams, they all serve different purposes, right? So the drilling, you're getting the nuances of a particular question type. Timed sections, pacing is a big part of that. You're looking at your pacing. Where are you allocating your time? Are you getting bogged down? Are you getting stuck? Are you moving at a fast pace? How fast do you have to move to have a little bit of time remaining at the end to be able to go back? Then the endurance, we've got your full length 4-section exams for the new format starting August, where they're bringing back in the experimental section. They all serve purposes. They all have a place in your prep. The drilling, you might see more in terms of what's going on with a particular question type, let's say. The timing, the pacing, the endurance, you see the biggest benefits of those on test day itself. When you're able to fully complete the exam, you have some time remaining for each section so you can go back. 4 to 5 full-length timed exams, in my opinion, honestly, isn't that many. At what rate were you doing them?
I was doing about one a week and then reviewing that exam in depth and it usually took me about 2 days to fully examine. I would go into LR or logic games and I would list out the question. I would say, what confused me about this question? What kind of question it was? What made me pick the wrong answer? Why did I cross out the right answer? And I did that, and it was time consuming. And in the moment, I realized things like, I understand why exactly I did that incorrectly. And I understand that this is what this game or this question is really asking me to do. And so I feel like I allocated a lot of time to that, and then I would go back and drill. And I think that I would drill, get more comfortable with that question type that I know that I got a lot. Say I got, 2 or 3 sufficient assumption questions wrong in a timed exam, I would go back to the sufficient assumption questions and drill those. And then I would get comfortable with those. But then when I take my next practice exam, I feel like I'm going in with all of these things that I have to recall from questions that I've gotten incorrect. And then it's like, then it all hits you and you might not be expecting the questions you may be expecting might not even pop up so frequently on that next exam. So yeah, I do understand, like, I want to take more practice exams, and I do think that I'm at least going to take 2 to 3 more, maybe even more than that before my exam. But that's what I was doing. I was taking 1 and then taking 2 days to review it, and then usually drilling the weak areas.
Well, you're right that what you learn on a practice, what you learn in drilling in that context, it can be tough to make it carry over into a full-length exam for a couple of reasons. One is the pacing element, getting bogged down, having the grab bag of various question types in the context of a section, whereas before you were seeing them in isolation. Mm-hmm. So that's something to adjust and get used to. And the solution to that could just be doing more sections, doing more exams to help yourself see the connections and make it translate, to get a better handle on the timed setting and the endurance as well. The other thing is that, as you said, it might not even come up, and that sucks, but it happens, right? I mean, the LSAT is kind of like an elementary school spelling test where the teacher gives you a list of 100 words and only spot picks like 10 of them. Right. You don't know which 10 it's going to be, though, so you have to learn everything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right that, I mean, the exam is going to have sufficient assumption, but what structures will those sufficient assumption questions have? We can't say. You've seen in the course, I lay out different formulas, different structures for sufficient assumption, and I lay out 6 major categories that are the most common, but they might only pick 1 or 2 types, and then the other 4 didn't show up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, I definitely think that taking more timed exams and timed sections would definitely benefit me. I think that's the biggest issue, is like, I feel like I've been dedicating a lot of times are a lot of time in preparing for those opportunities to take the timed sections and take the timed exams. And I'm trying to carry over so much in my head to remember on how to attack things correctly that it can kind of, I can like lose track of simple things. Even like there have been times where I've reviewed a full length exam and then gotten like a 2 or a 3 in LR wrong, and it's like, okay, well, I know that I should be getting 1 through 10 correct. I mean, that's like, for me, 1 through 10 should be all correct, and it shouldn't even be like a second thought. And then, I'll see one wrong and I'll go back to it. And I said, why would I ever think that would be that? And I think it's because I'm trying to carry over so much stuff that I need to recall and correct. So I do think taking the full length timed sections would definitely benefit me. I did have a question about the October LSAT. Would taking the October LSAT put me at a disadvantage in the application process because I would have to wait that extra month and a half to receive my score and then submit a full application to a school?
No, it's plenty early. Applying early matters much less than it used to. And really anything in the fall, including even the November LSAT, would still be considered early in the cycle. Things have evolved over the years.
So I guess the score that I'm trying to get to isn't super aggressive. It's something consistently, between 155 and 160. There's a school that I know in my area that I would feel comfortable applying to, and there would be a good opportunity to receive some merit from that school. I just would like to see some consistency with my scores, because I have seen, I've scored above that, and I've also scored below that many times. And I don't want this to be the test to, have it go below. So I asked about the October LSAT because I guess I was kind of looking for a recommendation. I don't feel like I'm really strong in any area of the section. I feel like I'm like decent in a lot of them, and that can vary from test to test. I can take a test and my LR could be really bad, but my logic games is good and my reading comp is good, or it could be any of the other combinations. So would you suggest maybe taking the August LSAT and the October, or just pushing back to the October and then dedicating that time to really shoring up everything, taking more practice exams so you could feel more confident? And I could feel more confident in maybe a bigger sample of scores.
That's a great question. So yes, I would definitely recommend you take October. The additional 2 months or so could do a lot for you, even if you got only a few more points by taking it in October over August. The perceived delay in your applications wouldn't be a big deal at all. And I say perceived because I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't think it's really a delay. Yes, you're applying in October, end of October or early November, depending on when you get your score back and put your application together, but it's not a huge deal. As for whether you do August in addition or not, can't say yet. We'll have to see what your practice test scores are like as it gets closer. If a day or two before the August LSAT, you're looking at your practice test scores and they're not close to where you want to be, I probably wouldn't bother taking it, just to avoid having yet another take on your record. But if you're scoring in a range you'd like, then you might take it just to see, but know that also October will be another opportunity. And I definitely recommend retaking regardless, because as you said, you get a larger sample of potential higher scores, and schools take the highest. So why not give yourself more at bats?
Right. Okay. So for my prep leading up until August, I just finished week 1 of the 1 month. So I did all the logic games, every single type, all the examples that you laid out in the templates. Should I stick with that until the test date, and then maybe, this weekend, and then 2 next week do timed exams? Or would that be something that, since I'm only focusing on logic games, would that really be beneficial to me?
I'd suggest mixing in some reasoning, some reading comp, either individually or as part of full exams, just because you have the prior exposure. You're not starting from total scratch here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing something that could actually, I wasn't running in circles, because that's what it's kind of felt like. I took a prep course leading up to my first scheduled exam that I didn't end up taking. And a lot of the times I just felt like I was like really missing that thing that should go off in your head when you're reading a logical reasoning question, and it's a weekend question, exactly what you have to look for. I was kind of not getting that in totality, so I went back and redid my foundation. So now I was caught in like this in between area. It's like I didn't want to go back and start all over and try to figure everything out, because I did also dedicate a lot of time beforehand. So there were some things that I knew and some things that I didn't. And I just didn't know if it would be a waste of time to just kind of sit in that like middle gray area and just take practice exam after exam if you weren't really sure on your foundation. So this has actually been good advice for me, because I just kind of needed some more structure into how I was doing things, instead of going into a day saying, okay, I'm going to drill 2 hours of logic games. Okay, I'm going to go drill, 2 hours of sufficient and necessary assumption questions. So.
Awesome. No, I'm glad to hear it was helpful. The structure, and you can, of course, determine weak areas and drill them on the side. But since we're gearing up for test day, I would say the full length exams is the way to go. You review them, you note some weak areas, some trends, you look at some of the lessons specifically on that. One comment I wanted to make, since you mentioned it a couple of times, I wanted to circle back there, was the idea of trying to hold a lot of things in your head as you're taking the timed exam. You're thinking, I got to remember this formula, I got to remember this approach. These are not meant to be things that you memorize or hold actively in your brain. Like, I'm not walking around like, I'm not going for a walk thinking about, okay, well, contrapositives and sufficient assumption formulas. They're not actively in like the part of my brain that's conscious. They're subconscious. And I only bring them up when I actually need them. These are not things you memorize with the flashcards where you are going to empty your brain of it the second the exam's over. These are things you absorb into your long-term memory. And then you surface them when you need to, when you see a particular question stem, or when you see a certain structure for an argument. Then you say, okay, well, when I see this, here's what I do. Do you play any sports?
Yeah, I used to. I'm washed up now, but I played college football, and I played sports all throughout my high school career too. So
cool. So, by the way, the mentality around sports and preparing for game day, I think there's a lot of parallels with this. When you so football, let's say, there's all sorts of plays. People draw things on the chalkboard. You have the physical football as like an icon, right? But when you're looking at LSAT books, you're not thinking about plays, right? You're not thinking about how you throw a football or catch one or whatever, right? It only surfaces when you're in that context, when you're on the field or when you're practicing or when you're training or when you see a football or someone throws one at you. But otherwise, it's not relevant. So I don't want you to feel like when you sit down to do a practice test or do a section that you need to pull all of that together the second you click into LawHub or the second you open a book. It's when you see that question type, or when you see that method of reasoning, or when you see that game type, that's when you say, okay, well, what are some other games I've seen that might be similar to this one? How can I use those structures to inform me here?
Right, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Kind of like developing like almost that like muscle memory kind of thing when you're placed in the situation, you know how to like you just you recognize how things you've done in the past, how to apply it to now. So no, I agree. I did. And
you only need to surface it when it's relevant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bringing over all that, like reviewing a test for 2 hours and then trying to bring it over to a brand new exam might not be, the most tangible thing to be doing, and expecting that the same exam that I just reviewed would be the same exam that I'm taking now. So that helps.
Right. Awesome. Yeah. Some of it might be relevant, but I want you to think more about the aggregation of all the prep you've done up to this point will combine together in ways in your brain and ways you can't even control. I get the sense that maybe you're trying to actively pull it, when I want you to instead think more about passively pulling it all together.
Right.
And that like it'll just happen naturally. It'll happen organically. It'll happen while you're sleeping. It'll happen when you take a day off from the studying. You need time to away from the exam, because that's when it's kind of sinking in. Your brain is making connections you're not conscious of. And then just when you need it on test day, it'll surface naturally.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I had really. I just needed some structure and direction. So
awesome. Well, I'm glad we connected. Keep at it. Let me know if you need anything moving forward. I'm happy to help.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.